Told to go ahead and record. Yes, I told to go ahead and record to this, but no one should be able to talk through this. They should not be able to.
Yeah, these ones. Ah, hey, yeah, it's done. I'm like, I got stuck. Yeah, it's done. It's right on the side. Yeah. I have like. If you're in the beginning.
Do you like it? It's different than before. I've always been dark.
That's what. I haven't been there once.
Started first meeting in January.
They did it right after you, last time.
Did you? Oh, Monty, is that the company?
Yes, thank you.
I was there on that one. Did you change the batteries? That's all. You don't need it.
This one. Connected to the system?
Did you unplug anything when you got in that box? No, I did not unplug. Oh, these ones are, so all the black ones are the two silver ones
So
that got unplugged.
I did not unplug a thing.
That's wrong. All I did is put something in and then unplug it.
So one of the counts.
Okay. I didn't on.
Then he gave me a call and he didn't really see me.
And here's that.
Okay.
It's got a little good. So I'm like, no news is good news. Oh, I'm like,
There's people out in the room who they like, that it needs to be. Okay, you have it.
Oh, this was on. Yes, they got this. I don't, because I think it's the mistake, but I emailed them. Right. And because Alan was like, I can't wait till we get done. And I'll let you know, maybe coming out Monday, but I've seen all those meeting on Friday, just to check. And then we were going to on this, so they have actually. It's all right, actually.
Yeah.
But I was there was something, you know, it was just like, the update, which about the very power. Something like added on, I didn't remember to change it back, so I'm not gonna be correct. Do it. Yeah, but I, you know, of course, we think about that, what we're talking about. Is it why you want to plug in speaking in better life?
Right.
I've heard so many things that you absolutely, but it's just like, I'm nice. Good done, so. I was like, get it all.
Yeah. So now, yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna go.
That's why you're hard.
Exactly. We had thought about, I was not on with my brother now. So I think
We got. That's okay.
yes, so they're just 2 years apart. That's right. We got a bit of press. It's all distributed in the drivers on the song. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny trying to remember. Anyway, just one of those, because you know, you know, it's pretty. So they're looking at the whole.
This might.
Residential. That's all right now. And it was nice that Alan was there. Going over the school. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you'll go to the driver. Oh, but he will be there, but he would recommend. I'm not something not here. He told me.
Yeah, he started. I mean, it's fine now, but there is a lot of extra stuff that's.
Yeah.
Rather go over building.
House on the other side. In years. So you know what, it's really like I'm son, just for the day, what's the thing? Or not, because me for that birthday. Here's this July.
I was trying to shake that.
26.
I think your mom told me it was the 26th. Sounds okay. So they're like,
Yeah.
you realize they're that close.
Yeah, no, the reason is, you know, they're very small.
That's.
Oh,
This is the. Yeah, and they just. Yeah, I think we should move it here. What? It was, we went to June, something. Okay, Sean, will you check the organized for somebody, have you checked everything? And if you guys are not signing yet, can you try to on the side of the please? There's only like 3 days on there. I think you can make it around. Not for what you mean. I mean, he's gonna do it.
And you have the other reporters. You're good. Take one. All right.
No, I want to. Well,
I'm sure you know that when this is on this agenda, that I think that this is
All right, while we're patiently waiting for stuff to happen, let's get started on the work meeting. Ron is not here, but was tasked to lead that discussion. Hopefully she'll show up real soon. In the interim, I put together some stuff to talk about. Our discussion is just on the short-term rental subdivisions, and basically it's ordinance 60.02. So I put together some stuff for you guys to look at. These are all just mine here. There's some ideas that I came up with because we were going to have this discussion. The whole this whole section's on short-term rentals, but I just took the first section of that, which is only for subdivisions themselves and how they relate to the rest of short-term rental. And as you can see, a lot of it hasn't changed, but what I wanted to do was just kind of go over a history of the development of this ordinance itself. Quite a few years ago, the discussion was had about short-term rentals and whether or not we wanted those in our town and how they were going to affect the housing. In our general plan, it's mentioned a couple of times that this is something that we wanted to work on and clarify. So that's kind of how this generally came about. Lots of discussion whether or not we even wanted short-term rentals at all. And the compromise came down to, we wanted, as the town, we didn't want short-term rentals unless they're already grandfathered in. We didn't want them in the old part of town, but any new subdivision would be allowed to do it. And then they set forth the process. Well, what brought this about in discussion mainly was that there's 2 new subdivisions, down to 3 actually. And those three subdivisions, each are considering whether or not to do short-term rentals in their subdivision, so.
Just to each one,
It's not,
It's not, it's broken,
like, maybe I'll just figure out
but I'll take this one, you can talk.
and talk about it.
Hopefully the magic mic speak.
is that? And shortage here.
All right, so that's kind of a little bit of the history and the reason why this ordinance was written. Me personally, I was involved from that side of the table during this, while this was originally happening over the last 4 years, almost 5 years. We had looked into changing quite a bit of this, simplifying, clarifying parts of it. And we were kind of stonewalled by a lot of the public who didn't think that we should allow these anywhere in town. But yet again, we had to compromise, and so we're kind of going with that, being able to allow that. Allow short-term rentals in the new subdivisions, and how that was going to happen. This is about it. So as an overview, kind of for the public too, short-term rentals are allowed in those new subdivisions. They have to be declared by the developer, and then that has to be passed during final plat. There's been a little bit of discussion about how exactly that's supposed to look, and that's what we're going to do with this is try to make sure that it's more clear about how that process works. It does become a conditional use, but we don't know if that is all supposed to be done at the time the developer does it, or at the time the permit is actually called for or applied for. So that's why we need to clarify it, and that's some of the work I was doing here. The other part is now currently it's called a overlay, a STR development overlay zone. The question I have is, do we want to continue calling it a zone, or is it just an overlay on an existing zone? So that's one of the questions I had, and I've made those changes in this particular document to show what I think about that. Also, just simplifying, there's a whole section in here that comes directly from our let's see, number. You look at number 3, where it talks about the concept plan. All those points that are on there are already in our subdivision reviews. I believe that just to simplify it, that could actually anybody who's doing a full subdivision is very familiar with that process and plan. It doesn't need to be right here in this short-term rental part. I've argued for years it doesn't need to be there, so that's what I would do, is take those out. And then as you go further down, there's just the basic regulations. You've got to follow state law. We as a town have to follow state law and notice of a short-term rental overlay. And then I've changed a little bit, or suggested changes for on number 6, you see the red underline. It just says such conditions will follow those found in Untitled Chapter 16. Therefore, we can take away number 7 completely, because all of our conditional uses are in chapter 16. We can just refer to that directly, as a conditional use is being issued. And then number 8, I just simplified that one. This one we will go over in detail tonight as we talk about the subdivision that we're approving a zone change, determination, overlay, whatever we want to call it. That's being determined tonight, so we will go through those later. I suggest that those first 3 are irrelevant to this, seeing how it's a conditional use. That's going to be addressed anyways. And then I just went 1, 2, and 3 on those. So I just took the stuff and I moved them down and I just related from 1, 2, and 3, and then I bullet pointed the 2 items that are under number 2 that relate to it. So
I have a question. On number 6. For you, I think it was 6,
number 6.
for your reference, section that can go follow goes down, begin chapter 16 and crossed everything out because it was redundant. So my question being that there was in here, does that also include on number 7 that you crossed out? Does it also include on the first line, but shall not be limited to?
So in chapter 16,
Yeah.
we have all the conditions, all the things that we can put conditions on. If you don't have them listed, you can't actually create new conditions. So in chapter 16, we spent a lot of time making sure that we covered every general aspect about conditions. And so we really can have a lot of leeway in conditional use about, say, all these things listed here, your landscaping, your lighting, your structure, your density, ingress, egress, all those are listed already in chapter 16. And
But the term shall not be limited to, which to me says, anything can be further discussed.
So-
Is that even legal to have in the ordinance?
right,
So it opens it up and you could bring in new concepts, new ideas, new thoughts, new studies, new surveys.
so yes, that's allowed, or that's put in chapter 16. Those things are in there. We can't use the wording that's right there anyways. That's not really allowed by state law, because any conditions you have to be, we can't use the what? You can't use the phrase shall not be limited to, when it comes to conditions. Can't just make up new conditions that have to be something that's listed. And then we have to reference back to the reason why we get the condition. Thank you. Welcome, Cameron. Stand back.
I told,
Yes.
I told them to be here for the work meeting, sorry. No, Bronwyn had, a family emergency, so.
Okay. So I was just explaining to the rest of the commission that I put together just a start on this, seeing how this will be the discussion, the main discussion tonight on short-term rental subdivisions and the process. And so I did everything down to that point. In that ordinance, I just went through and looking at ways to simplify and clarify that part of the ordinance. And then later on, we want to get with the application and all that. How that's applied for and how the conditional use is granted and all that. That's an additional part of the ordinance. This is just the starting point. I don't know where Brian was at on it. She wanted to do it because she had some
Yeah, and I think she had something.
Yeah.
So, but I don't doubt that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and unfortunately, she's not. She had that kind of nervous. You can go ahead and continue reading your business meeting, you know.
So there are other questions you guys might have. I know this is, very going on right now.
So, one question I have is, does it need to be designated as an overlay zone or not? Where are the designations instead of a zone, because then the rest of our ordinances is technically not a zone, right? So like in all the other zone.
It's not listed as a zone.
Right.
Anywhere in our ordinance except for in
Yeah.
chapter 6.
So that is one of the questions. As far as the ordinance itself goes.
And that would be something we get to determine. The difference being, as I understand it, the difference is just the process you go through to designate or to do a zone change, or are we doing it as an overlay of a existing zone? And so, to me, the history on this and the compromise that was given was that we were going to allow these in new subdivisions. So therefore, why are we making it a new zone?
I think personally, a designation is cleaner than a new zone. That I feel like if you put another zone on it, like so rural residential, and then slap another zone on top of that, I just feel like it gets messy. And doesn't really fit the.
Plus, we have a lot of regulations that clarify this. For example, when you do a zone change, you have to send out letters to everybody. And here's the interesting part: if you have to do that as a developer, then why do we require that same procedure to happen when somebody designates their home as a short-term rental? That has to happen as well. So are we requiring it multiple times for the same thing? Or do we only have to require it once and not require it at the end? Me personally, I'd like to see it when it's designated as a short-term rental. When they're trying to get a conditional use permit, that's when those letters can go out. And all that. The public needs to be notified, because we don't know how many homes are going to be short-term rental. And any subdivision, it might be all of them, it might be not all. And so I go through the hassle initially, right? Since we already know that they designated that in their CCNRs and homeowners association of degree as well, so.
So if I understand you right, then you're advocating that the overlay should really be taken care of by applying for a conditional use permit in the development?
No. The conditional use permit process happens when somebody applies. That's what it said in here right now. That when somebody applies for a short-term rental permit, that's when the conditions get applied. Not during the development part of it. But it's being treated like that if we do it specifically as a zone change. Then those same regulations and procedures have to happen. So where do we want those to happen? The front end or the back end? Why are we making them happen at both times?
So you're saying we're forcing it as an overlay and we're making them also apply with the conditions.
Yeah. So the overlay would be following the procedures here, the concept plan, they would say that they're going to do it. Then they have to follow the procedures of making sure that it's in their CCNRs. They have to mitigate any issues, at that time for the proximity of that to any other part of the community. But as far as the designation of a single home as with short-term rental, that's when the condition of use actually gets applied.
Thank you. We passed that pretty good.
And then turn it all back over to you.
Okay. We're gonna break now, for the next, do a 5-minute break. For everyone that's here, and then we'll go into our regular meeting. Will be just a hair. I've got 2 minutes until 6:30, so we'll be a hair over. We'll get a 5-minute break and then we'll start ordering the. Didn't we already finish that?
This will be helpful. I sure mind. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Why? I need you to figure out what it's gonna cost for all 40 loads in your. Truck. The name of them. So you two up there. So you'll have to load. Whatever, so. Just let me know later. Yes, but I'm talking about no drugs and can't you get like 40 yards on them? Good, that's not. Yeah, 5 yards. Yes. Are you sending me an email?
Yeah.
There's still there. You know. Yeah. I'm gonna run by that, so when you hit it, it's real loud.
Are they going? Okay. I just made sure they didn't get stopped.
They're not, that one's not right there.
Yeah, is it supposed to die? Like, oh. I'll put this back. I don't know.
Yeah. 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 Ether. All right, it's time to get started. It's been 5 minutes. So we will move into our regular meeting. We're gonna first we'll do the declaration of conflict of interest. John? None. Ken? Conflict of interest?
No,
Cameron, no. Wyatt? Angelia?
No,
maybe for a chat.
So we'll move on to number C, review and possible approval of draft minutes for September 14th, 2022.
Crystal, did you get those?
I got those in there, it's not here.
Oh, then I'm good.
Did you have anything?
There were just a couple of teeny grammaticals, you probably already found. I haven't seen that in there.
Okay. Wyatt? You did, okay. Angelia? Good.
Yes.
I didn't see anything, I missed the grammatical. Shocking, I know everyone's shocked. But no one misspelled my name in there, so. It's good.
My name isn't misspelled either.
Your name is always misspelled, John. Your mom misspelled your name when she wrote your birth certificate.
But it wasn't misspelled that time, I didn't want to say, so.
Oh.
Thank you.
All right, I'll take a motion on that.
So moved.
I have a motion, and Ken's made the motion to approve the draft minutes. Second. Wyatt has seconded the motion, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We'll go to item D, commissioner comments. If anyone has anything they want to bring up to the commission. Angelia, do you have anything?
No.
Wyatt? I don't think I have anything this time.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I've been, as I've driven out of town the last couple of weeks, I have noticed a few people working along the cinder block wall at the gardens, cleaning up, fixing drip systems. It's purely voluntary, and they've been out doing it, and it really makes a difference. And certainly something that we might want to recognize as an entrance, one of the entrances to our town, and maybe put it in a newsletter or something like that, or that they taking some pride to their location there.
Great, yeah. Thanks, Ken. Definitely a big shout out to those people. Crystal, you want to make a note maybe for the newsletter?
Yeah.
John?
Surprisingly, I don't have any comments at the moment. We'll save those for later, I guess, right?
Yeah. Gosh, go up there. All right, so we'll move on to number 3 on our agenda. This is a public hearing. I'll take a motion to close the public meeting and open the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Sean's made the motion to close the public meeting and open the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Angelia seconded that motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we're now going to go into the public hearing part of our meeting. This is for the public. We'll start with item number A. This is the continued public hearing from September 14th, 2022. Proposed subdivision preliminary plat, 12 Mesa subdivision from Jeff Lee. Yeah, I saw Jeff. Yeah, Jeff, do you have anything else for us on this thing?
I have some progress, but it's so slow. Jeff Lee, the slope analysis is finished, the geotechnical stuff done, the wastewater treatment is not, I had to have it in, I don't know, 10 days ago. And they were like, oh, we'll have it, they didn't, I still don't have it, but when I talked to them yesterday, they said, we're just finishing stuff, we'll have it, so I will submit it to Crystal so that they can post all of that. along with my, CCRs for the HOA stuff, and then we should be able to actually progress next month, but how many times have I said that? A lot. But
I think this is the first time you said next month.
I have progress. I actually have 2 completed items, which I'm really happy about, but the wastewater treatment should be, they were working on another project from up the road and they got that one's finished, so they're saying we're about wrapped up and I'm starting to get invoices, which means they should be done. So you guys have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Jeff, on the wastewater, I you worked so hard on this whole thing, and I really appreciate the effort you put into it. I'm sure we played a huge part in dragging it out.
No, this is all engineers actually, not,
On the wastewater, can I assume my memory says it's individual septic on up there?
yeah, the issue there is if we could do individual septic, you could do septic, on lots, and there, and there'll be an amended plat map next month as well. But there's only 18 inches of soil, Alan dug one day, and there's very little soil on top of that limestone, and so it was like 18 inches, and so they have to design a wastewater treatment plant. You can't do individual septic. That's what's taken so long, is they're designing a complete, kind of like what the hotel built up there, just on a smaller scale, but they're doing a wastewater treatment plant that will treat all of the residences up there.
And where would that be located?
On the southeast quadrant there,
Over next to number 1?
yeah, and then you drop, as it comes down the hill, we'll be going down off the hill in the corner of the property there. And that's really what they've been trying to figure out, is just how to get it with the leach fields and everything lined out, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
Thanks, Jeff.
you're welcome.
I have one more, Jeff, really quick.
Sorry, it's too quick.
Are you, and I haven't been to a meeting, the last meeting, but are you planning short-term rentals here?
I haven't applied for anything, and some people know this, that I'm under a contract, potentially will not be developing this, it will be someone else. And right now, I'm still treating it as if I'm gonna develop it, because until something transfers, I'm not gonna stop. I have been watching the proceedings with the neighborhood next to me with a lot of interest. I get a little concerned when I kind of say, I understand people don't like it, I understand they do. I also know how much it affects property values and stuff. So it definitely causes, when I watch that, a year and a half ago, when I started this process and we tried to get this rezoned to highway resort, everyone told us, oh, you don't even need to do, in fact, it was the city council, people objecting to in the referendum said, you don't even need to do that, because you can just get a short-term overlay and you can do rentals up there if you want. And then I watch kind of now when people are applying for that and I see the opposition to that, I think, I just think people keep pushing the ball down the hill a little bit. Right now, as I look at this, I think, part of me thinks it's dumb not to ask for it, because it will preserve you the right to have it, especially because it looks like everything's going away from it. As that said, though, I am under contract right now, so.
Are the owners of the project planning to just develop lots, or are they also going to build buildings, homes for sale?
I don't really want to speak on their behalf. Part of what I can say, when I first talked to them, they needed a place, they wanted to build homes for them and employees and stuff, and so, what all that entails, I don't.
You're not sure about spec homes per se?
No, I'm not sure on spec homes, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Is there what's that?
It's public.
You reference property negative, and to make it work more in your opinion, or less to be short run?
If you had a short-term overlay on your subdivision, it's definitely gonna be worth more, because the option is there for a future homeowner that they can have a short-term rental. And so if you don't, so even if I was to develop this and I didn't want it. Okay, even if I was to develop it. And I wasn't ever wanting to do short-term rentals, I just want to sell them. It would be in my best interest financially to get the overlay on there, because then you have it. And you can only do it one time, you can only do it as you develop it, so it would negatively affect your property value if you had it, and so to not have it, so. Where I kind of see what's happening, you know, and again, what I see happening right now with the project next to me, I think. Geez, I can see where this is headed, it's not gonna happen, so like Harvey said, I should get the overlay there, just to protect my interest. Again, I don't think I'll be owning this property by the end of the year, doesn't look like it, everything's progressing that way. But for me or for anyone else that has property, I think it's dumb not to get it, because it's gonna be gone, I think that's my opinion, it's gonna be gone, and even right now with the ordinances say I can have it. I'm getting a strong undercurrent that may not be the case, so.
Okay, I was, when you referenced, it, you did say one way or another, and I assumed it was that way.
You want to convert your property value. In today's market, it helps it to have it,
Okay.
whether or not you relevant.
Is there any other public comment
Questions?
or questions at this time? Come on up and then speak your name, then
Yeah.
talking to you.
Jordan Allen, real base on our area. I just wanted to say I highly oppose any construction building going on in the fields east of our subdivision. And I just don't think that people are totally aware of all the flooding that goes on when it's raining, and we've been coming down here for the past 40+ years, every year. And seen a lot of flooding going on, and in that area where the ditch is that they're planning on putting the rental homes. I just don't know where it's gonna be good for the public and for traffic. Just anything going on, and all the smoke that's going on right now in the KOA campground. In the process of that, the last 3 weeks, they just chopped down those trees and they're smoldering, and that smoke's pretty bad that they're putting out. But anyway, I'm just unhappy with the whole process, and I think unfortunately it's all about money. I don't think people are paying attention to what other people are thinking about the area. And I think it's hurting the solitude of the town and the beauty of it. And again, I just oppose that building going east of Zion River, well, east of Rio de Slam. Thank you.
Thank you. Quick clarification there, Joanne, when you're talking east, are you talking about where the KOA is going, or are you talking about
I'm talking about
the subdivision?
and the rental homes that they want to put in
Okay, and
on the east side of Rio de Slam. Yeah,
thank you,
don't see where it's gonna be good.
thank you.
Coming from Draper too, I wanted to say, there was a lot of issues with all the growth. Back then,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
city had to put out a lot of money to correct things during that whole building process,
Thank you, ma'am.
so.
Anyone else have a public comment on the Quell Mesa subdivision? All right, we'll move on to our next item. This is item number B. This is the zone change from Jeff and John Staples. What's that?
Is this, can the council comment?
Commission? No,
Commission comment on public period?
we'll move ours. We'll have our discussion down. We'll go back to regular meeting. So we'll move on to item number B. This is a zone change from Jeff and John Staples subdivision Zion Edge. East of Rio de Zion. Currently residential, they want to add the short-term overlay over that residential. If this was passed, it would make the subdivision eligible for short-term rentals. which are currently, otherwise they're banned in the town.
And is there a plaque overlay that or?
So we've had the plat a lot, I don't know if we have any plat. Was that it? No, there it is.
Plat's already been
I'm
approved.
just trying to figure out where it is, yeah.
Yeah, so it's right east of, Rio de Zion.
I got it, thank you. Back on.
Not quite clear to the bridge, but almost. All right, so we'll take public comment on this zone change at this time. No public comment. Okay, we'll move to item number C. This is amending chapter 8.30.d zoning district height and setbacks. The reason for this change is to remove reference to the resort zone, which no longer exists in our ordinance, and to remove the reference to RD, which is not in our ordinance. In fact, no one even knows what RD stands for. So. That doesn't really match with the title of it. We'll take public comments on this one at this time. Well, do you have that one up on the screen? Crystal? Sorry, chapter 8.30. Yeah, there you go. That's the changes. Any public comment on this one at this time? All right, we'll move to the next one. This is amending chapter 8.30. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the same one. Amending chapter 8.26, maximum height of accessory buildings from 20 to 25 feet. The reason for this change was removing irrelevant material and to match other ordinances.
So, question,
Yes.
public, right? Comment, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm anxious, sorry.
No, that's right. So this would change the maximum height of accessory buildings from 20 feet to 25 feet. For reference, 25 feet is the maximum height of the primary building. Take public comment on this. Oh, hey, Monty.
Question for you, so we're building a little bit on some slopes, no, I mean, us now. So what happens, for instance, if somebody like along the river in, Desert Gardens, or that, where's the 25 feet start from? Does it start from the road grade? Then if it drops off,
This is the entry into your house, isn't it?
What is that again?
Finish grade.
Finished grade of the end.
up from there. So
Yeah,
what drops off the back like a daylight basement wouldn't count.
walkout basement would not count.
Okay.
Correct. And it wouldn't be road height either, because sometimes your house height is higher than the road, sometimes lower, so. The finished grade of the entrance. Thanks, Shane. We looked at that, and I've forgotten what that was. Any other questions or comments about the change for accessory dwelling, for accessory building heights? All right, so we'll move on to the next one. This is item letter E, amending chapter 16.22, standards for conditions by use. The reason for change is removing the road material to match other ordinance and further define and regulation to lodging terms. So what this attempts to do is take different types of lodging and specifically delineate the differences between those types of lodging units. You have a- Yeah, there it is. Yeah. You go. There you go. So you can see the 4 separate. I think there's a 5th one too. Oh, a couple more. 7 of them all together. Is there any comments on, Monty,
We're gonna start at the top, we're gonna start at the bottom, so I'll start at the bottom.
wherever you want to start, Monty? This is
So-
your time.
What is the, why do we need to change our definition of short-term rental from states? So I'm gonna read the states for everybody, okay?
Okay, go ahead.
And I want you to hear the word residential 3 times. Short-term rental means a residential unit or any portion of a residential unit that the owner of record or the lessee of the residential unit offers for occupancy for fewer than 30 consecutive days. I can't find, let's see. I don't see the word residential. Pardon me. Anybody tell me why we feel different than the state?
Good question. Thank you, Monty.
Yeah, because we go back to the state often. I mean, I heard you, Sean, oh, well, state law says some, I wonder why we're like going absolutely 180 from what the state means.
Good question. Yeah, we will discuss that if there. Anything else on there, Monty?
Doesn't say anything about setbacks.
Oh, yeah, because these are just definitions.
Okay, perfect.
These are just strictly definitions. Anyone else have any questions?
So I guess I do, obviously, we're gonna discuss this, should the public hearing not be maybe this tabled and. So I think we're putting the cart before the horse. Wouldn't we discuss something before we have a public hearing? With that,
Do you have comments about it? We're trying to get comments from the public at this time about these, so your comments are ideal. Okay, have more of those. Anybody else? It's helpful for our discussion. Yeah.
So we did discuss this last month as well. We didn't have a public hearing, but it was discussed last month as well.
Okay.
But your concern specifically was no problem, which is. I think it's a good comment. Anyone else have any comments on these definitions?
one more question, has an attorney reviewed these?
Yes.
Yeah, because I've heard people refer to short term, not only it's a little tax. So, and that was in a public meeting, so I don't know why we would say that, but. So
Could you repeat that?
I said, our town attorney, he has referred to, little individual, like what we call short term rentals, for instance. When somebody would pick a piece of property and put like, individual camp cabins up there, he's like, each one of those is a little hotel. I mean, that's his quote,
His philosophy.
his interpretation.
Of the definitions we currently have.
The state definition.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, they're not residential units. And I'm intimately familiar with short-term rental because we have a history. So, and it was,
Not very clear history.
and it was strictly because, it was as a residential, so I'm wondering, why we feel the need to, and I see, things changing. But why do we feel the need to, take a short-term rental and completely redefine it from what we historically thought they were and what the state still feels they are? So-
What should those mini homes or whatever tents or cabins that aren't residences that are called short-term rentals, how should they be defined and called? Are they different than short-term rentals? Or should they be motel, like Pete said, should it be qualifying them under motel ordinances?
Are you familiar with the duck test?
No,
Okay. So if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So, I mean, we can call it a short term, you know, cabin around anything you want. I mean, that doesn't make it what that is. So, I mean, by definition, you could set up, you know, like drive-through camp, there's a whole slew of camper cabins. You know, those could be short-term rentals, those aren't short-term rentals. You know, I mean, the fact that, you know, I checked into it without seeing somebody at a desk. Well, I think we have short-term rental by definition of Wildflower, but you don't check in without seeing somebody. You know, so those are in conflict with the definitions as you know, presented here.
so if they're built to be a commercial rental, a short-term commercial rental, you're suggesting that there should be a different definition or name for that, like motel,
You know,
and qualify under the motel ordinances?
probably, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not on the zoning and planning, thank God, but, anyways, I know I was close. But, anyways, you know, and I get it, this is something that 5 years ago, they didn't exist. You know, I mean, we've been here for quite a long time, so we've watched this kind of morph into a new category. Now, the fact that they advertise on Airbnb or VRBO, doesn't make them a short-term rental. They advertise it because it's free until somebody actually books their property. I mean, it advertises. You know, so the method of advertising doesn't have any influence on what it really is. I mean, if you live next to, like, for instance, if somebody put next to your house, if it was an empty lot and said, you know, it's commercial, we're gonna put all these little cabins in there, the potential influence on your property would be no different than a motel. People coming and going at all hours. Actually, because they're smaller inside, it drives more of the activity outside. You're starting to head towards the RV. You know, I mean, the argument could be made that, you know, we've got RV parks that are part RV, part TV, part wagon. So I don't think, you know, I'm not thinking that a wagon's a short-term rental. You know, I mean, it's got some giddy tie-ins and giddy, but yes, but short-term rental. That's kind of a hotel on wheels. That would be my opinion. So, you know, I mean, that's what you guys do. But I mean, the state's kind of already for us. So, yeah, I'm just wondering why we feel compelled to go against the state. The state's going north. We lobby to go with the state.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Anyone else, public comment?
Yeah, just I kind of want to explain that a little bit. In the end, I don't care how things are defined, but the definitions are important because of the loopholes that developers can then use. A classic example right now, there's a project going up by under campus. It's in the county has outlawed short-term rentals. Because they haven't hemmed in their definitions, these individuals are calling it a distributed hotel. And it's short-term rentals. It's the same thing that under campus is, but they're able to use a definition because the county didn't set definition saying this is what we allow and these are the parameters. So whether or not we want to break things down, that's up to you guys, but I think that we need to definitely have definitions that separate different uses. The state says a residential unit, and you brought up a good point. And when you say, what about commercial? Well, you don't have a residential unit in a commercial zone, but not all short-term rentals do have a check-in person. So, or not all motel, you know, motels have a check-in person, they have a kitchenette, in short-term rental units that you don't have a motel. There's differences. I just think we need to define it on our ordinances, whether we want to go with just motel or not, I don't care, but it needs to be defined out to where we have some criteria to run on, because that's being used against the developer currently. And I want to hem in where the ordinances do it instead of the zoning administrator having to make a decision on whether we're going to write a conditional use permit or not, just hem it in with the definition. So we know it is. That's kind of
So question, you're coming from the standpoint of your position as administrator and zoning administrator and the difficulties that you face and come across in this, asking that we have certain definitions So that you then can help the developers and yourself and the town to, move forward as quickly and as inexpensively as possible for everybody and successfully as possible for everybody.
Yes,
So that being said, how do you feel about, because I value your opinion about Monty and Heath's comments of if it looks like a duck or, call it what it is, a motel. How do you feel about those specific examples?
well, first of all, he could look at these and understand there has to be some kind of differentiation. Whether he did in the past or not is irrelevant. It's just like Wildflower, a classic example. When Wildflower came in, we did not know how to define it. It wasn't a campground. It wasn't an RV park. It wasn't a motel. It had combinations of all these different factors. And so it got named a resort. But we had to redefine how we looked at things based on changes in the way things are built now. Yurts is another example. That was never put in. It was tents or mobile homes or campers, but no one had ever heard of a yurt. And it's different from a tent in that it has these amenities. And it's kind of on a permanent foundation, but it's not really a house. So I'm just asking that we hem in our definitions more clearly. However you want to do them, but there are differences between these things, regardless of how behind the state may be. These are things that should be looked at. And we can be more restrictive because we have special needs that the rest of the state may not have, being the tourist area. So I agree with Monty, I really do. I just think for the sake of ease of people coming in, knowing what they can and can't do, the definitions play a key role. And I'm saying that from that position, okay? When it comes to council, we'll look at it.
One clarification, was Wildflower or Zion White Buffalo classified as short-term rentals when they were constructed?
Yes,
Did they have a conditional use permit for those?
no. They had a conditional use permit for their entire project, but it wasn't required for those. Now, White Bison, formerly Weeping Buffalo, decided they wanted a CUP on them because they were going to do in-person checking.
Okay, so they amended theirs.
Right, with Wildflower, we did one as an overall for the entire project, but they weren't isolated out.
It wasn't specific to.
Correct.
Thank you.
I need to make full disclosure. So, there's a proposed, whatever these things are called, that are going in next, proposed next to us. And we actually support it. The guy came and knocked on our door and said, hey, Mom, actually, I found. He was looking at stuff, so I was nosy and I said, hey, what you doing? So anyways, and he said, how can we be good neighbors? And I'm like, oh, well, this is what we're willing to offer. We assume that because they're lodging, that they're classified as a 60-foot setback. And we said, we'll be more than willing to work with you on the setback, because I said, I think for what, you showed me, I could, 60 feet's kind of punitive, 30 feet works just fine. Also, I wanted to mention Wildflower is in, what kind of zone is that called?
Highway resort.
What's the last thing? Resort, right? Of course it's a resort. You can do resorts in a resort zone. I mean,
Yeah.
but commercial is not a resort. So, I know this is a difficult issue. It's like, because these things they don't fit in any specific, it's not A, it's not B, it's not C, they're different, you can take Airstream trailers, right, put them on a permanent foundation, called cabins.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of pushing the envelope there. So I think the key word in there is residential. And the state uses it 3 times in one paragraph. So there you go.
County, where is it you live?
I'm the house on Mesa Road.
On what?
Mesa Road.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're on the way up to the south side now. And we're surrounded by them, but
Oh, one second.
I was just gonna say, it's got power lines and the BLM on the other,
Yeah.
which is okay.
Any other public comment on chapter 16's definitions? Everyone else just came to see why. Okay, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing. Oh, first, we need to continue the public hearing for item number A, the letter A. Until next month.
I'll make that motion that we continue the public hearing. Until next month for the proposed subdivision of Quail Mesa. Jeffrey.
Sean's made the motion, to continue the public hearing for item number A. Second. Wyatt has seconded that motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Okay, now we can close the public hearing.
Make motion to close the public hearing and open the public.
Wyatt's made the motion to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Do I have a second? Second. Wyatt made the motion, Angelia seconded the motion. Too slow. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Oh. We have a letter. Oh, no, this is. Yes, we're gonna go to open forum. Now, this is to discuss anything that's not currently on the agenda, or you want to go back to the agenda, you can go back to that too, I guess. But 2 minutes per speaker, open forum.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you, Monty. Anyone for open forum? All right, so we'll move on to number 6. Item A. I'll entertain a motion to table this until next meeting. After we have the public hearing again.
I'll make a motion to table it, hearing again after next week.
Wyatt's made the motion to table it until after the next public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Angelia seconded that motion. Any further discussion? We'll vote all in favor. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we'll move on to B. This is discussion or recommendation to approve or deny zone change Jeff and John Staples subdivision Zion Edge. East of Rio de Zion. Currently rural residential to add short-term residential overlay. We did have some public comment on this one. I'll share it anyways. All right, so the public comment on this one was talking about flooding, traffic. And then I think the dust and the smoke was related to a different project. And then financial costs if the town makes mistakes in improving projects. All right, as far as the flooding and the traffic, we have obtained those studies from engineers. Take that as you will. They said the bridge was adequate. They said the intersection was adequate. And we have a detailed drawing of how they're going to move the water around. Yeah, that was also been signed off by the town engineer. So there was a proposal put forward. The town engineer looked at that. He recommended some changes. Those changes were made. And then the plot was resubmitted for that. So as far as I understand, the flooding issue has been looked at multiple times and taken care of, as well as the traffic study, which was also signed off by our town engineer. And then for the dust and the smoke, that's something that will need to be brought up to the town staff so that they can get someone out there to look at that and make sure that they're watering that ground appropriately and, you know, with the dust, make sure everything's getting watered appropriately. And then the smoke, Yeah. But that's a nuisance item that the town staff will look at. All right, anybody have items for discussion on B? Go ahead, Ken.
As I mentioned to Jeff and the Staples, the rigors that they've had to go through from the county and from the city and the studies that have been done, have had to have been done, the challenging spot that it is, they have, worked their way through that, I think, admirably. And I just, I have no problems with it being properly engineered and looked at from county side and administrative side and developer side. I have a really strong opinion and feeling about short-term rentals. And I guess maybe I'm putting out a warning to the commission and the town when it comes to approving short-term rentals for our community, that I'm going to probably be a no in most cases. And it's because I think it diametrically opposes what I think a neighborhood and community should be. And I believe we're still so young about how to manage them, take care of them. If we look at the commercial units and types of units that we have in our society and in our own community, they all have very specific things such as owner needs to be there, or the commercial property has to have people there monitoring, watching, taking care of their property. And short-term rentals present a huge problem in my mind to a neighborhood where people have either come to retire or raise their children, and it's just diametrically opposed. It's putting a commercial, a rather unrestricted commercial venue in the middle of often in the middle of neighborhoods or what are going to be perceived as neighborhoods. So I really have a hard time with anything today. I admire the county putting a moratorium on short-term rentals. I'm sure that's a huge challenge for them with the open space that we have and the development and the demand and the interest in our world and the beauty that we live around. For them to have to deal with all the people that want to, for a buck, make a development and try to be successful in a commercial operation. And I don't believe commercial operations should be in neighborhoods. I don't believe they should be in our town as a short-term rental. I think they should be regulated in the way that motels and everything else is. So that's my opinion, and that's where I will vote until the city begins to get a stricter attitude and procedure and ordinances that can define where these things can be from the beginning, instead of coming to us all the time about where they should be and where they want to be. I disagree with Jeff about whether or not they increase or decrease the value of properties. Maybe out there in the commercial world, it increases it, but maybe in the residential world, it decreases it. So those are my opinions about short-term rentals, and I'm being stubborn and ignorant because this is more of just an opinion. I did do a study and some research one for the town council several years ago when they were looking at some short-term rentals, and looking at that study from Salt Lake City and other communities about what they were facing and what they were doing to try and get control over the situation. So Thank you for that time.
Thanks, Ken. So, quick question for you, if that's okay. What about the people, what would you say to the people that have no financial gain from these short-term rental subdivisions going in, but still think that they are appropriate to have in our community? What would you say to those people?
That we disagree and
So there's,
must agree that we can't always agree on everything.
so you just tell them that
Until I feel or see situations that correct my opinion and hunch and gut feeling as to what communities are made from. I just think that if we want to have, if we look at Rockville, there's several bed and breakfasts. Grandfathered in. Grandfathered, are they're not available any longer, or maybe that's a space thing, is it, maybe it's an added ordinance. Okay, but most of the ordinances we have for hosting involve the owner being present, living on the site, and there's a reason for that. And it's the same thing that we say for commercial enterprises like campgrounds and motels and hotels. The owner or representatives need to be here 24/7, monitoring that. And I think there are logical reasons that don't even need to be discussed as to why that is important. And I think it should be important in neighborhoods where there are homes and residences.
So what you said, until the town sufficiently put in regulations to control them, you would not be supportive of them at all. What would those regulations be, and what are the specific things that you think need to be regulated?
I think that regulatorily, I'm not sure they can be regulated in a development neighborhood. I'm not sure that you can find regulations at this point. That's why so many communities are saying no at this time. We're going to put a moratorium on it until we can find a way to define it and control it better. Either by being able to know who is doing a short-term rental in a community. Sometimes it's hard. Some communities have had trouble. Larger communities, I don't think ours would have trouble defining who's doing it. But larger communities, there are a lot of short-term rentals, and they have staff that get on the internet to find out who's doing it so that they can go after them. And make them have a permit to do so if that's available. So I'm just against the concept, period, as a way of developing a community with neighborhoods and family.
So personally,
I don't know that might know what I mean by it. I apologize for interrupting you, but I wanted to say that I'm not sure my no isn't the only no in the room, and that most of these things are going to end up going forward, especially the ones that are in process.
so the only thing that I drive through town, like I've lived here my whole life, right? I don't like to see everything get developed. Like
Right.
it's how it is. But in my personal opinion, I would prefer to see high-end homes versus tents or teepees or wagons or plus to rent them out for $400 or $500 a night. If I brought me and 5 of my family members decide I want to go on vacation, a lot of times we couldn't afford $2,000-3,000 a night worth of motels or rentals, but we could rent a house for $500-600 a night and make it economical for all of us.
That's a good argument, and I appreciate you bringing that forward. I have a cousin lives up in San Pete County, and they came down and rented the one over in Rio de Janeiro and do it every year. He and all of his buddies from high school all get together, and there's a dozen of them there, and because they can afford it, for one thing. and because it's a beautiful place and it's a nice home. That's a particular place where I almost feel okay about it because they kind of really stand alone. And I also noticed that there isn't too much negative stuff flowing out of that generally. Once in a while, there's some noise and things like that. I don't know if arguments about what it does to septic tanks to have 12 guys, or a bunch of people or 4 families in a house, not caring about those things for a couple of days. I don't know what those arguments are, whether they have any leverage or not. But I think that's the whole concept that I'm trying to portray, is that I don't know. I just don't know. And you make a really good point about families being able to all get together and not have to spend the money that we have to do.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kent. Anyone else have any discussion on this?
Nothing new, I guess, than what has already been discussed.
Just a couple of comments. I do appreciate your strong opinion, Ken, because that definitely helps debate. So we all have strong opinions on one way or another. Like Monty, I've dealt with this particular issue on short-term rentals, and that's not exactly the whole subject tonight. It's actually just that whether or not we're doing a zone change, which is a whole nother matter in itself. But to address the short-term rental thing, again, the document that I shared today is the ordinance that we have. I'm proposing some changes to it. But in that, on number 4, the town shall comply with all provisions of Lulu, and we talk about annotated 10, chapter 9, part 5.
So that's one question I have, is because we had this an ordinance change, proposed ordinance change last month on our, and we tabled it and
For
60.2. No, was that just a work item?
That was a work item. So
Because it was brought up in town council about kind of legislation.
it was
that was the one that Ken had
Yes.
done where we're gonna get rid of the whole
Yeah.
thing altogether.
Right.
And
we did have a public hearing, but that was a couple months ago. I know.
Okay.
That was done, Ken, when was that, 3 months ago? When we submitted and had the public hearing for the removal of the short-term rental overlay,
Yeah, 2 or 3.
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That was tabled and, Ron
then she was gonna work
was
on
gonna
it.
work on it.
Yeah,
With Kent.
it's 3 months ago.
Yeah, that's why she was gonna lead the discussion on that in the work meeting today.
So, my point is that this ordinance that was written took into account all those strong opinions. And where we all kind of came to an agreement was that instead of having those short-term rentals come into an existing neighborhood, we would allow those, but we would only allow them in new developments. So whoever comes to buy a house in that development, they will know, hey, I can do a short-term rental or my neighbor can. There may be short-term rentals there. The best short-term rentals on the market are those that are in the middle of a residential area that have people that are permanently there, because it feels like you're just at home. And so we wanted that feel or that ability to be able to do that, but we want that in new subdivisions, and that was the compromise that came about. So it's important that we recognize that this is happening now. We have approved one before previously, through the way the town did it I feel that it was appropriate. Again, I feel like last month we did a great job reviewing everything on that plat and everything. And now we're being hung up by a technicality. And I'm afraid that this zone issue is going to be bigger than the short-term issue. Okay, so the short-term rental issue, it's already basically been decided where this can go. Now it will be, is it a zone or is it not a zone? So it's kind of hard tonight approving a zone change, even though it's not really the zone that we're approving. So this is kind of the hard part. The town did notify, it said in that part that I was just reading, the town's required to notice everybody according to Hulu and the Utah code that I read. And it says, in noticing and reviewing an application for a STR development overlay zone. And it says, just as it would under any other zone change or land use ordinance amendment. So that being read would almost say, yes, it is a zone, but it says it should be noticed as if it's like it's being done as a zone. So I go to the state code, and the state code basically says what our notice requirements are. That's it. So was this noticed properly? I believe it was. Now,
for sure.
yes, and now it's properly, definitely properly noticed, but it's noticed as a zone change. And I want to clarify that in the next while, and that's why I brought this document
That's
together.
as per the attorney's request, correct?
Yes. Yeah, that we need to clarify that we've already made the decision that they're going to be in new subdivisions. Let that new subdivision deal with it. I really like the CCNRs, and I read all of them, and they were boring. But I like what they have put in there. These aren't going to be huge homes. They've covered about every issue that we would have put conditions on. They're already covered in their CCNRs, and that homeowners association will take care of that. So I believe it will be a good subdivision. Hopefully we'll see how that plays out in the next little bit. I'm glad they're moving forward with it. I'm a little concerned that if we approve a zone change, that becomes a legislative issue with the town, which means that it could be referendum. And that is the scary part, that we're setting these guys up for the town being able to have that come at them as a potential referendum, and then the town being sued and all the things that will foretell out of that, because we're part of the legislative body. We're just a recommending body. We can't make those decisions. But as they're made on the council level, they're our representatives. And a referendum takes that away as them being representatives and throwing it out to everybody to vote. I think that's wrong, and hopefully this doesn't happen like that. Tonight, we didn't have any public comments specifically about the zone change. I hope that it's quiet, because this should go through. It was already decided that this is how this should happen. The regulations in this ordinance, I feel, are way too stringent, but they're really good if somebody's scared of what a short-term rental is going to do to their neighborhood. It covers a lot of that. And I think they did a good job of putting it together. I think we as a commission did a great job reviewing it last month and making sure that everything was said. Too bad we didn't say, and we approved a short-term overlay zone. And just that one word would have maybe covered the need, even though it was in their CCNR, even though it was on their plat maps, even though we got lots of public comment about it. I just hate getting thrown under the bus. We did our homework, we did our review, and hopefully we can move this on.
Thanks, Sean. Um. Just to address some of the things Ken said, I really get the concerns, the kind of the negatives to a short-term rental. Like I understand those things. And maybe it is time for a change to that, with the way the city is grown now. I know that when this ordinance was made, we looked at those concerns, and this was, what, 6-7 years ago, 6 years ago? Sort of a long time ago. I don't know how long ago was this, what is that? I think it was about 6 years ago. When we looked at this, we did have a few short-term rentals in town. We looked at this, we talked about those concerns. And specifically the concern that it would be bad for the neighborhoods. And yet we also had a substantial group of people that felt like, oh, you know, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me that it would change my neighborhood. It's fine with us. So we had both those groups of people, and Sean mentioned it. Kind of the compromise that was made was, okay, we'll protect all of the existing neighborhoods. But if someone wants to come and build something new, then we should allow them to do that. You know, I was one of those people that said that. I was one of those people that said, yeah, let's protect our existing neighborhoods. If you have a house, and you've been here for a while, you shouldn't have your neighbors coming in building something big and then renting it out as a short-term rental next to you. That's not fair to you. But I also feel that it's not fair to stop a brand new development from having more freedoms in it, right? More opportunities for people in it. And we've had, since I've been in here, since this was passed, we have had 4 subdivisions be built. No. 4 subdivisions be proposed. We've had 2 subdivisions be built, and neither one of them wanted short-term rentals. We've had 2 of those 4 subdivisions wanted short-term rentals. One of those is currently under construction. They have just started construction. And the 4th one that wanted short-term rentals let their permits lapse, and they're the ones that are back asking again to be bought and everything up by your house. So I look at those numbers and I say, and I think I just don't see that specifically for the town of Virgin, with the way the development is being done here, I just don't see that there's going to be an overwhelming and huge run of short-term rentals. I just don't see the evidence that that will happen. And so for Zion Edge, I think we should recommend approval of their zone, but moving forward, I have no problems with making adjustments to the rules. I also don't have any problems with singling out other zones. Like, we could take our residential zone, right? So we could take our residential zone, we could say, look, you can do short-term rentals in rural residential, but residential is out. Right? You cannot do this, you cannot do this overlay in a residential zone. And I don't mind setting areas of town apart for that, to help limit the access to it, so. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not opposed to making changes that will limit short-term rentals in the town. I'm not opposed to those things. I am opposed to a complete outright ban at this time. Just based on the history of the town, and maybe that will change, right? So if Jeff's subdivision goes in and the one up by you goes in and they're 60% short-term rentals. I would probably look at that and say, you know, both subdivisions are 60%. I'll say, well, no, that's too much now. We have to pull back now. But at this point, I just don't see. I don't see the evidence that we need to pull back yet. When I looked online, Virgin has very few short-term rentals as we currently define short-term rentals. Now, if you look, there's lots of places to rent in Virgin, but most of those are either in the resort zone or they're somebody's casita, or like these people over here that have the tents in their yard, right? So the only ones that I know of in town that are actually a short-term rentals are the ones that were grandfathered in, and a couple of ones that probably should be looked at trying to close down. I think there's 2 of those. But the other ones are grandfathered people. So that's where I stand on the issue of the short-term rental overlay. As far as for Zion, I this seems to me, and no matter how I felt about short-term rental subdivisions as a whole, I am completely against the town, including the lawyer, working with the developer and saying, this is what you need to do. These are your options. This is what you need to do. And then at the last minute, everything is changed. Or there's a major change done. So if this was brought up in the beginning, and this is the process that was told to them from the beginning, and this is the process they worked from the beginning, then that's a different story. But to change it at the 10th hour it's just wrong. It is wrong to do that to people. And anyone that was involved in working with or hiding things, if they were, that is a moral failing. That is a moral failing to do that. And if I just could not personally ever do something like that. And I hope that that was not done by anyone else. I really hope that it wasn't. And I think that probably it was just caught at the last minute, and that's what I hope, that's what I need to believe. It was just caught, something that was caught at the last minute, and this was not known for a long period of time and hidden. I really hope that. And then I just needed to bring up something else too in this meeting. We talk about the community that we want to build, the place that we want to live here, and I am all for that. And so I think I'll wait to discuss, wait, do we have this on? No, we don't. This would have been in the discussion. earlier. But here's what I would like to see happen in Virgin. And this is my vision. And this is what I would like, so you can take it as that. This is just what I would like to see happen in the town. First and foremost, I would love this town to be able to become a place for families to live. It has been so nice that my kids have neighbors that are their age. And so at the way housing prices are and everything, that is getting more and more out of reach. And so my goal would be to, and I mentioned this earlier about the residential area, is to make an area and to make it so that families can live here. That if it is at all possible, and if I can find any way to do that, I'm going to propose rules and ordinances that will make that happen. And I know a lot of people are thinking, then why are you allowing short-term rentals? Because that increases the price. There is almost no families that can pay the cost of what it will be to live in the subdivision that Jeff and John are building. Almost zero families that can afford that. Which is, so it does not go against my goal of having families to allow short-term rentals in that subdivision. Because families can't go there anyway. My other goal and what I would like to see in Virgin is I would like to see some development in the commercial areas. And I don't mind if those are restricted or those are moved or whatever, but I would like to see development in there that would provide jobs for residents of the town and jobs for the youth of the town. And so all those jobs don't need to be high paying for youth, but I would like to see some high paying jobs in town for residents. So I think we need to move on trying to make it for both of those. When I look at Rockville, there's like 3 or 4 families that live in that whole community. And there is no chance that their kids will ever be able to live in Rockville. Almost no chance that their kids will be able to stay there. Rockville has become an old, dying town. And it will probably stay an old, dying town. And that's their choice, but I do not want to see that for Virgin. I don't want Virgin to be an old, dying town. I want it to be a vibrant community that has families as well as retirees, because you need an older population to help mentor those children. And so you need both of those things. So I'm not against retirees. That was my point there. All right. I don't hate you if you're a retiree. I don't hate you, Ken. You're not, you're like semi-retired, but. And then the other thing I want to see in our town is that I want to see our town stay a small community that works together and helps each other. I don't know how you do that by ordinance. And I don't know if this is true or not. But I heard something really disturbing that really has me upset. And this is also something that I think Virgin needs to move on to make sure it doesn't happen in town. So I heard that in one of our subdivisions, the homeowners association sent an eviction threat to a family that was living in their community. An eviction threat. Because of inadequate landscaping. And because they could see their dog run in the backyard from the road. If that's the type of people that are gonna move next to me, that are going to, I don't want to live here. That's not the community I want to live in. We're a family during massive inflation, living in an area that requires a lot of gas to get to and from places, gets an eviction threat, not help. That makes me so mad. And I really hope that I was misinformed and that the story is not true or that I'm missing a big portion of it. And if I am, I apologize. That is just what I heard. So if I have to choose between that and a short-term rental next to me, I'm going with the short-term rental every time. And I apologize for getting on a soapbox. I will get off now. I needed to get that off my chest. And so I have now. So is there any more discussion on item number B? Yeah, we'll take some comment.
I didn't know whether to do this during the hearing or now as the developer, so it's just a question if I could, across the board. Love to hear from everyone that's not going to be argued at all. It's a question for our understanding as developers. With what we have applied for and hopefully is passed between today and the special meeting tomorrow with council, will our subdivision zone remain rural residential?
Yes. Yes, this is only an overlay, so the other underlying zone will remain along with all of the requirements and regulations of that zone. Though the overlay will just add new requirements, whatever's listed in that chapter 60 to the already existing requirements of the zone.
Okay. Does anyone have a different understanding of it than Cameron? Thank you.
Since I allowed him to speak, does anyone else want to speak? All right, any other comments from the commission on item B? Any further discussion on that? Yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
I just want to thank you for your comments.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, we'll entertain a motion. And just remember in wording your motion, this will only be a recommendation.
Make a motion for recommendation to approve the zone change, item B, number 6, item B.
Ken has made the motion to recommend approval of the zone change for item B, which is the Zion Edge subdivision. Do I have a second?
Can you specifically state?
Yeah, Karen, it needs to be stated, it's not the zone change, it's something with the ordinance. You need to state it as a short-term rental development overlay.
So Ken, do you
Zone
want,
change.
Ken, do you wanna just, read that whole section there?
Just, you can make a motion, but you need to take the motion and then start where it says short-term rental on that last top front page. Right above it. Very top.
There's the one.
Where are you looking, where are you telling us to read from?
See the very top of your ordinance?
Numbers, are we looking at D?
See the very, very
Oh,
top, second
not
line,
the actual ordinance.
short-term rental development overlay zone.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Let's see. Okay, I got too many people talking at me.
It's right up here, Ken. Can you read the top
Very
one? Read that top one, or the top three.
An ordinance,
Yeah.
You can say that too, or whatever you want to say, that's what it's how it needs to be stated.
even I move that an ordinance amending rural residential zoning designation of Zion Edge subdivision. V 2148 A 1 B 1 A to include a short-term rental development overlay zone designation. Next.
Ken has amended his motion and made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Kent made the motion, Angelia seconded the motion, we'll vote. Angelia?
Yes.
Wyatt?
Yes.
Cameron, yes. Kent?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
The recommendation to approve is passed. We'll move on to item number C, discussion and recommendation to approve or deny amending chapter 8.30.b zoning district height and setback regulations. This is the change that removes the resort zone, which no longer exists in our ordinances or in the community anymore, and removes the reference to RD that is not in our ordinances anymore. Ron?
Just to comment, yes, the title of that doesn't fit that at all, but that's what it is, so. It's pretty simple.
It's perfectly.
Yeah, perfect. So,
I think it's fine.
but that's what it is, so, I don't have any further comments, it's simple, straightforward.
My biggest failing is copy and paste. That one right? All right, do you have any discussion on this or any motions on this?
I have the motion that we recommend approval on item C, any chapter 8.3 or 30.d zoning. Yeah, zoning district height and setback regulation.
I have a motion to recommend approval. Wyatt has made that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Wyatt's made the motion. Kent second it. We'll vote. Sean?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
Cameron, yes. Wyatt?
Yes.
Angelia?
Yes.
Thank you. The recommendation passes, recommendation to approve. We'll move on to D, discussion and recommendation to approve or deny amending ordinance 8.26 maximum height of accessory buildings from 20 to 25 feet. Oh, I forgot to mention we had no public comment on either of these ones. Oh, not true. No, one didn't make a comment. This is in the wrong spot. So the old definitions there, and you can see the new definition.
So why do we need to change it? Other than this is the new thing, or has somebody come forward proposing something shorter, smaller, taller? I mean,
This came, this is why did we originally start?
We were taking out the 1 story, That was the original change, and then it was after discussion, we decided to bring it back with, wanting public input and arguments for why it shouldn't be 25, which is the standard height for buildings in residential area.
Yeah, so just to give an example, like. Once he's not here, I can pick up left too early. So Monty built a garage, which is detached, making it an accessory building. Kent also has one, but Monty's is 2 stories. I think it's smaller, but it is 2 stories. It does have a small living area in the top, which he rents out. He forgot to mention that when he's declaring conflicts of interest. So it is 2-story,
But it's under the 20,
but it isn't under the 20 feet, I believe.
yeah.
So originally it was, we already have buildings in town that are 2-story and accessory. So as long as they're under the height, we should allow them to be 2-story. When we looked at it last month, Sean and a few others said, well, why don't we discuss moving it to 25 feet at the same time? And so that's why this was brought forward this way.
So Sean, is there an architectural reason? Is somebody talking to you about it? Is it just your gut feeling that we want to give people more options? What's your feeling as to why you want to go up 5 feet?
So I'm not going off gut feeling, it's just building height at 25 feet. You can't do 3 stories, can do 2, and obviously we take out 1 story that allows for 2. Most buildings nowadays are doing higher ceilings, things like that. It's just the we're seeing what the building practices are that are happening. If somebody wants to build a casita behind their house, why does it have to be shorter than their existing house? And it's not just about casitas, it's other buildings. Garages. A garage, if even my dad has always wanted to have a shop in his backyard. And he's gonna do, work on his trucks. He'd like to have a little taller building so he can have a lift in there and utilize that. Whether that will happen or not is a whole other story, considering the price of building materials, but yeah, I want to hear the arguments why we have to keep it at 20 feet. Compared to the 25 that we have everything else. We already hear the arguments about taking it above 25. I want to hear why these ones have to be left at 20.
When we say accessory buildings, you just feel that with how we're building homes today with 9 and 10 foot rooms, that it gives more options for accessory buildings, but keeps us within the 25 foot range aesthetically. And I don't know what an engineer or an architect, I don't know what an architect would say here about whether a casita should be at least 5 feet smaller than a house. We don't know that. You could build a house 20 feet and put the casita at 25, I guess. And I don't know that architects would care of it.
So a lot of people are doing detached as well, and if you detach it, you can't go up 25 feet. If you attach it, even if it's just a little walkway, you can have it at 25 feet. So
I wonder if it helps somebody put in, like if they have a large, tall travel trailer that would be as high as this one. I don't know, what is this? 12, 10, 11 feet. Maybe having a detached garage that putting a large RV in, a large motorhome. They couldn't put it in my 12-foot door. So, that gives, and that's a pretty popular item in today's retirement world.
Yeah, look at desert gardens.
Yeah,
They have a lot of RV garages, but they're all flat roof.
yeah, and that's the other thing, I was just gonna mention is pitch, if somebody wanted to pitch roof on. A garage or something, they could have it for 25, 20, it makes it pretty difficult.
I think the argument to maintain the 20 feet on lower. The lower height is to make sure that any accessory, any accessory buildings on the property aren't built after, later on or after the fact that might be more intrusive. Because accessory dwellings can be placed closer to the property lines in the back of the lot. So the argument is to keep it at a lower height because they could be more intrusive to the neighbors. I think that is the argument. And allowing them to be big would also could change the character of an area. So that would be the argument to maintain the lower height.
Can you personally defend that concept?
So
Would you?
So in my opinion, because I think both arguments have merit, in my opinion, Monty's detached garage would not look any worse being at the same height as his house, right? In fact, it could look better being bigger depending on the layout of the property. What my suggestion was with this ordinance is we do allow for the 25-foot height with the caveat, right? So it should read
No, taller than.
shall be erected at the height. No, I think that should say no greater. No greater than 25 feet. Or the height of the primary structure. Whichever is shorter.
I might have. The thing that I don't like about that is that, say I buy my house and I'm a broke young married couple and can only build it
Right, and I'm broke.
15 feet,
Just wait till that baby gets bigger.
15 feet tall, but I want to build a shop to be able to work on stuff or whatever, then that really limits me to not being able to put a garage in the park trailer under or things like that.
That's my thought too, like, say I want a ranch style house, but I wanna put my RV in the garage. I have, like my house is smaller than my garage, anyway.
Could we,
Yeah, yours is smaller than your short.
Yeah, I personally have that at my property right now, we bought and our house is smaller than our garage, shorter, yes.
put something in that brings it back away a certain distance from property lines?
We could adjust that because when I say that, all residential areas have for the primary structure, they have a minimum setback from the back of 25 feet. Your auxiliary, auxiliary, ancillary, whatever. Your other building can be up to 10 feet away from that property line.
But we
I see that.
did change those on the sides, though, so your house can also be at 10 feet.
Yeah.
From the sides, correct. I'm not saying that, there's still,
It would just be that back.
it would be the back, right? So if we could look at changing. We could look at changing setbacks and say. No ancillary or auxiliary. Accessory building can be within 25 feet of the rear property line, and then all the other setbacks apply still. And then it would not be any more intrusive than a house.
But who would that negatively affect?
What do you mean?
Well, if we.
So it would negatively affect
About
someone with a small lot.
rural residential or a small lot, yes, residential, but maybe more of a farming area or something.
It would mostly negatively affect someone with a small lot.
Yeah, it's residential areas.
Like, it might affect Sean's house because Sean doesn't even have 25 feet in his backyard already. Well, maybe he does, but it's close. It's close.
Could we do something like if the height is 20 feet, then it stays within that 10-foot rule, but if you want 25 feet, then it now goes to this amount far back, sorry. I can't remember.
Setbacks is your.
You could do that. I don't see how you write that up, but it could be, someone can figure that out. I don't,
That's about what it is.
Well, again, where you can put your garage, use your lot as best you can. Setbacks to me are not my favorite things. We won't get into that discussion.
Thank you.
The home that we raised our kids in, Bloomington, was a 2-story home, acre lot. Most of the lots in the development were an acre or more. It was the Bloomington Mansions. And I remember the next door neighbor built a 2-story house, huge, 3 feet tall. I had to be over 30 feet or 25. And
It's probably 35 feet.
and the ordinance was 10 feet from the property line. And it was a beautiful home, and I don't think I never heard a negative comment about it. So I didn't feel negative about it. It was tasteful and stuff, but that's just one example of how that works without having to do more setback. But I like Angelia's idea that, hey, you want to just do 20, you can do it at the 10-foot setback, but if you want to do a 25, then it's got to be 15 feet or more.
So
But I don't know with big lots, if it's gonna make much difference. It's about small lots.
if we would like to go that route, I would recommend that we move ahead with this ordinance with the change of keeping it at 20. So we can accomplish the original purpose of removing the 1 story while still maintaining the 20 feet. And then if we want to write something up to accommodate a larger structure, we can do that in another meeting.
So let me give you an example in town, what could have been better for a family. Heidi and Zach Lee up here, they have a garage, and above their garage, they have an apartment. And they thought that would be great, they did the trusses so they could accommodate for that. With an extra 5 feet, it would be a regular sized room out there, and now it's got the sloped roof on there, and it's a little cramped, but it was what they could do because they were trying to meet the regulations here. Another 5 feet in that particular instance where their house is down a hill, it wouldn't have made any difference. They would have been able to have that extra apartment above their garage.
Well, I think that's kind of the same, like, almost the same argument as the guy that wanted that. How I changed it. His lot didn't really affect the 5 foot more higher, didn't really affect that lot in particular, but it's the rest of the. Right,
It's everything else, yes, so, but their house is higher than the garage. So if it had matched their garage, it just would have looked like it's one, that's true, full building, and it wouldn't be a big deal, but it is. I don't know if they have it attached and then still did it smaller, or I don't think it's attached. I think it was separate, and they have a little courtyard in the middle. Anyways, there's definitely reason for us to have it At least matching. I don't think we can. Well, Wyatt's arguments would do it. I don't think we can just say, well, it can only be as high as the primary resident because.
Wyatt has a short house.
So
Yeah, this whole thing,
I built a short house.
I got your house there, it's fine.
Let me read you something from state law too. When I was looking through chapter 10, that was all kinds of fun. I came across this, it says the legislative body. This is under zoning districts, and it says the legislative body shall ensure that the regulations are uniform for each class of or kind of buildings throughout each zoning district. Now, the reason I underline this, my first thought was, why do we have buildings in commercial zone at 22 feet and everything at 25? But then I see that it could actually apply to this, if we interpret it that way, just making everything uniform. So, and building practices, a lot of people need that extra income. We're looking at ways to do more affordable housing or provide for more long-term rentals, not just short-term rentals. And this would be a great way to do that, to allow people to actually build a something above their garage or something attached or detached in it, and have it at a standard height. 25 feet is pretty standard. That's what the whole town is, except the commercial zone. So why should we just leave it at 20? I haven't heard an argument yet about that. Plus, when we do figure out if setbacks are an issue, I think the math on that won't play out. The 10 feet will be sufficient, even for a 25-foot structure for sites and views and everything else. So,
And Sean, anyone else have anything? All right, well, I'm gonna make a motion that we recommend approval of. Still not able to not have. I recommend, I make a motion to recommend approval of to amended chapter 8.26 maximum height of accessory buildings. With the change of leaving the 20 feet instead of 25 feet. I made the motion. Someone want to second the motion?
I'll second.
Kent has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll vote. Sean?
no,
Kent?
Yes.
Cameron, yes. Wyatt?
Yes.
Wyatt, yes. Angelia?
No,
No. The motion, the recommendation to has passed with a vote of 3-2. Sorry, I'm just making notes here. Item number E, discussion and recommendation to approve or deny amending chapter 16.22 standard for conditions of uses. Next comment from Martin.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, Martin. Hopefully we addressed your concern in our discussion. All right, so now we're on to this one, which I do remember. Monty commented on was leaving it closer to the state definition, or at least adding the residential use in there as part of the definition. Which I think is a fine idea. Could we define that as a residential use? What that means, I have no idea.
So just to help out, I did give everybody the definitions that were left out of my definitions that were related to lodging. And as I went through those, not all of these were even addressed in this particular ordinance. So the ones that weren't addressed, I'll probably be putting those through as an ordinance next month, if that's all right. Because you're looking at them, you've seen them 2-3 months in a row, and now I'll just move them forward as an ordinance if you guys feel comfortable with that. But it will not be these ones, it will only be the like RHF guest quarters and RHF permits and things like that. If that's okay, and I'll work with Gene on the service station automobile one, and the changes on that one to make sure that that's it. It's looking pretty good, but I'd like to have a discussion on these. Left over, but in here we have, you can see the short-term rental or STR definition that we currently have. And it does need to be changed. With the notwithstanding the definitions of dwelling unit, lists all that stuff. This particular sentence is found probably a half dozen times in our ordinances in different places, so. I think Kent had a comment about do we need for lodging, where they are the definitions for bunk houses and boarding houses and lodging houses. And the reason we do need them is one, to differentiate them, and two, because they're in so many different ordinances, we'd have to strip them all out of all those. So for now, it would be easier to identify them. And then later on, we can go and strip those out and not ever use them. But if we don't have them there, will somebody come in and say, I'm not building a short-term rental or a boarding house, I'm in a motel, I'm doing a lodging house. And then we're stuck in the same spot of having to define.
But I still don't quite understand whether or not we have bunkhouses and boarding houses anymore in town or the county or the state.
But we would if we don't define them and somebody wants to come put one in there.
So wouldn't they have to come get approval for that, and then we somehow have to abide by the ordinances that we have?
But if it's not defined, they can loophole that.
Yeah.
If it's not defined, they can do anything, they can put a yurt up. Don't they have to get permission as to what they're building?
Not if they can apply for it.
If it meets, sorry, he's asking me to answer. Go ahead. If it meets international building requirements, so the international building code says you have to have a foundation, you have to have sewer, water. They're doing something that is outside of our ordinances. At this current time, there's no conditional use requirements or permitted or prohibited use requirements. They can.
So they could call it anything, they could come in and call it a beehive, and then build a beehive.
No, that's, the purpose of this is to kind of put in all of the differences into different definitions. So if somebody goes, well, I'm gonna have a kitchen in mind, so I'm not really a motel. We could say, well, that falls under a short-term rental. If they say, I'm gonna have a shared bathroom, and it's gonna be separate from the primary dwelling and it houses 20 guys, we can say, well, that's a bunkhouse, where it lets you pin in all of the variants as much as we can identify.
It made me think that somebody is proposing, is there something happening like maybe at the month at the White Buffalo that, excuse me.
Let me help you this one. According to our attorney, we can't say in our ordinances, anything that we haven't defined is prohibited. You can't say that because cases have been brought against people, towns that did that and they lost. He says case law says you can't do a blanket prohibition. So we have one of two choices. One is you just don't define anything and take roll the dice, or you try to define stuff as best you can, so that something falls in, you put it into its appropriate bucket.
And to answer your question, I have heard rumors of bunk houses that were not associated with any of the developments that are currently going on.
Agricultural.
You heard rumors of somebody literally thinking about building one
Yes.
as a commercial operation
Semi
or part of the commercial operations.
partially, yeah, partially for other things too.
Just for housing. I mean, we need more lodging. So.
So,
I thought that I was kind of watching a John Wayne movie. Or something.
There are small places that have.
that there was. I don't wanna, I don't wanna break confidence,
Sure.
but I have heard. Two people in the town that said. Well, maybe we'll build a bunk house because this is gonna suit our needs. For when we have these activities here, and then when it's not being used for that, I can rent it out.
Hey,
And so,
I can see,
when they said,
logic in some ways.
and they said that because they're like, well, I can't be residential hosting on this piece, and I said, no, you can't be residential hosting on that piece. He said, well, can I do short-term rentals on that piece? And I said, no, you can't do short-term rentals there because that's part of the old part of town, like that's an existing lot, that's not a new development. And he said, well, then I'll just do a bunk house. And I said, well, we don't really allow bunk houses, and he said, well, your ordinances don't say that. Yeah.
So
Now granted, that was a couple of years ago and nothing has happened. However, it would be good to define.
well, and I know what we've been talking for the last few years about the Western Fleet. And certainly that's what the white bison leans towards. And I mean, I can see something like a bunkhouse. If it was done, you know, like the way the Muns have done some of their things so far, and if it was properly met the requirements that we wanted to meet. And is that what you're trying to do, is put some requirements down?
Yeah, so one of the things that this would do, like if you look at the definitions that he's defined here for boarding house and bunk house. Right, specifically, part of this definition is to say. It's the first line, site must be occupied by a permanent resident.
Yeah.
So that's specifically there to keep someone from circumventing our short-term rental ban inside the town. And so I think that is part of it, a lot of it is to bring people into compliance with our rules. Go ahead, Gene.
The way I've tried to do it over the past several years is you start with the definition, get that ironed out, then you can go and apply it to the zones as a yay or nay, or conditional use permit, or conditional use. But you have to start with the definition, saying this is what this is, and then determine which zone you want to allow. It's just a single step in the long process.
So you're putting in here, what I see you doing is you're basically taking the commercial idea and putting a couple of restrictions to it that are important, such as there is with motels and hotels, you know, or residential hosting. There's a permanent resident there, or a permanent.
Think of it like this. What's the difference between a motel and a hotel?
I think I know this.
One is
Motel is the concept of driving the car up to the door and checking in.
You kind of have that concept. So what do you call something that you drive up to the door, but it has a kitchen and laundry service? And maybe doesn't require a check-in? It's not really a motel, it's not a hotel. What is it? And this is coming about specifically because there are people in town that are challenging how we're defining stuff, saying, well, because it's not defined this, you don't really have to issue that definition. You should be looking at a hotel, which is not per se a motel. So trying to differentiate and give them titles, I don't care what we call them chats, doesn't matter what they're called, but they're different from the definition of a hotel or a motel or a bunkhouse or whatever. Specifically on the green property.
You gotta have, yeah, so.
What do we define it as? Because it's different, what do we call it, so we can put regulations around it or protections around it.
I think what Monty was talking about, the duck thing, well, these aren't ducks, they're not chickens, they're probably a platypus. Okay, so we're trying to figure out, okay, it's not this and it's not that, how do we define it? Now, with this particular way I threw this together, I took what Gene had. He was originally putting it in 2.12, which is our definitions. I had a little bit of heartburn with that because these seem more like regulations. Because it says it must have this and it requires this. I'm not as opposed to that, depending on how we write it, if it goes into definitions. Once I put it together thinking that this would be the ideal spot for it, but chapter 16 is our conditional uses. Most of these uses in commercial zone are permitted uses. They don't fall under the conditions. So my proposal actually will end up being that we put it in chapter 8, which is the supplementary and qualifying regulations. And yeah, under lodging with the title and everything like that, but in this section specifically, it's where we throw all the stuff that covers, it's just kind of covered, and these are other regulations that cover the whole town rather than specifically about one thing or another. So we can't just put it in the conditional use section. It's got to be where it can cover everything. But I also don't believe it should just sit right in the definitions. So a general definition and then a reference to these further clarifying regulations, I think might be are really good. We should move on this quickly though, as far as the difference between a motel and an SCR. And Monty's right on. We need to be able to define what that difference is, what that platypus looks like. And who cares if it lays an egg or not? But we need that defined sooner than later. Otherwise, every development that's going on right now is going to be stuck because we can't figure out what it really is. So, and then moving forward, hopefully it will be a lot easier when somebody comes in and they say, I want to build a lodging house or bunkhouse. They'll know this is exactly what it has to be with the definition, with the qualifying regulations, and whether or not that's a conditional use or not. Thank you.
So as far as Monty's comment on the short-term rental definition, what were your thoughts on that?
I don't have any heartburn with adding what it says short-term rental, the definition can read a residential unit.
But does a short-term rental have to be residential?
A residential unit. Was that what he said? Was it residential unit?
I don't know. Let's look up definitions and see if we have residential unit defined.
I think you do.
And I think if it's defined whatever the state has.
It would, I don't think we don't have it defined.
Residential hosting.
But if it said a residential unit. For the purposes of law, whatever. For lodging of less than 30 days.
So we allow residential units and commercial. And that's where the heartburn is the only difference between rural residential, and commercial is density. But we still allow residential units in commercial. Could somebody live there permanently? Could they rent them out long term? Absolutely, it's just the only difference is the density. And I think that's where people are having a hard time.
Kevin, I think we call them dwelling units.
A dwelling unit,
Right, because people see residential and they immediately think, oh, this is. commercial zone.
and that's the fine dwelling.
Dwelling unit is, we took away the family portion of that. And that's the other argument I had with that other ordinance is we need to take the family part out and just use dwelling units. But we'll bring that up another time.
So. Anyone else before I go on? Because I think I would like to make some changes to these. So we'll continue with the discussion until. We're ready. If anyone else has any discussion on this.
Can I just throw one more thing out there? When I did go to the standards for conditional use in chapter 16.22, I did realize when we changed the CLF ordinance, which is chapter 50, we removed this stuff and put it into chapter another spot in chapter 16, and this is referred to all that stuff I crossed out at the very top. That does need to be removed. Yeah, one way or another in this particular chapter, whether it's done in this ordinance or another one, and just specifically target that, it needs to be removed.
No, that's correct, because we removed chapter 50.
And this is referenced already in
Reference.
chapters 60 for our chapter. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so here's my opinion. I think these need to be put in chapter 2. I know Sean hates that. But they need to be actual definitions. I find it. Sean's solution to have a simple definition with a reference to chapter 16 seems tedious. So I don't like that idea. I think these just need to be specific definitions. And then whenever that term is referenced in our ordinance, it needs to be capitalized, which would then indicate that this is not a standard definition, this is a specific definition, we need to go check in chapter 2. So I really think it needs to, chapter 2, that's where our definitions are. Yeah,
Chapter 2, I want to do that. That is the whole reason why I redid all the definitions.
I know.
To take out the regulation.
I know,
So as long as they don't sound like they're a regulation,
but
I'm probably okay with it.
I just think it needs to be in chapter 2. And then
And I think most of these don't. They don't really define.
Well,
because we're having to differentiate between similar uses, there has to be some regulation in here. Right.
just take out the word required anywhere,
So,
and that's gonna
and
happen.
I think required just has to stay in there because there has to be a delineation, like this is the difference. And this is the difference, like,
When you say has a front desk attendant and face-to-face check-in.
has a front desk or requires a front desk is the same thing. In my mind.
Words mean something, requires is the whole.
Anyway, but moving on from that.
It's either exists or it's forced. Is the difference.
So. On the definition of hotel, right, along Sean's line of his definitions and his likes to clean them up, this one Sean might like. I think that requires toilet facilities should stay. Kitchen or kitchenette facilities are optional. I think if it's optional, then we don't need to list it in there. So that can be removed. Hotels do not have. Like, I don't know, I've never seen a hotel that has a common bathroom.
Because it wouldn't be a motel or a hotel kind of thing.
So I think that could be removed. Either facility may be shared or in common. I don't think that needs to be there.
Well, that's kind of the kitchen.
It is too. It is referring to the kitchenette too, which that's probably why that was left in there, was really mostly for the kitchen or kitchenette. But-
More like a hostel.
Yeah, so I think
Okay.
from facilities to breakfast, that can be removed. That's my opinion.
Which one are we in? Hotel?
Hotel. So that's my critique of that one. Again, with the lodging house, kitchen facilities are optional, that could just. I think that can go away. Along with the shared or in common, that can be removed.
How about that, that is talking about your bathroom, but that's what differentiates your hotel and your bath.
Okay, so you could say restroom, but that doesn't, the lodging house doesn't. I see what you're saying. Kitchenette should be optional. Restroom, toilet facilities may be shared or in common. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you're right with that. We just have to adjust the goal. That, and you feel free to disagree with me on anything. Motel. Again, the optional part, I don't think that needs to be in there. The kitchen, kitchenette, optional, whatever, I don't think that needs to be in there.
Taking notes on this.
I am highlighting these sections, maybe this section doesn't want to highlight, so
What do you trying to highlight also?
maybe that kitchen or kitchenette facilities are optional in motel. And then either facility may be shared or in common. So from where your cursor is to breakfast,
Ah,
yes. I don't know why I won't want to do that. The breakfast can come out because that's optional too, like,
Just, are you on lockdown?
yes.
Just a suggestion, when potential new definition I was going to have started with the building typically of 5 connected dwelling units and more. Typically, your motels are going to be all connected.
That's fine, we could add that too.
We don't have that in there. I think it was on the hotel ones, but I don't know. It's not hotel.
I don't necessarily know if that's true, because can some of these cabin facilities be counted as a motel?
Yeah, so if they met these requirements,
So that they don't have to be connected.
but they wouldn't have to be connected, that's true. That's true, they wouldn't have to be connected. But that wouldn't say they have to be, because he's just saying typically. Just saying typically, so I don't even know if we need. It's on typically, but whatever. Residential hosting, casita needs to be changed to. Whatever our new term is, accessory. ADU, all right, we're just gonna go with ADU, accessory dwelling unit. So casita needs to be changed to read that way. And then. Short-term rentals, I think that we need to remove when it says built-in toilet facilities and kitchen facilities, we need to remove though these facilities may be shared or common, that, I think that needs to go. I think when we think of short-term rentals, we're thinking of a house. And houses don't have shared kitchens or bathrooms. So I think the shared or in common should be removed.
And I ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
To say, I have stayed in short-term rental homes that have a shared kitchen and shared bathrooms.
Because they're renting out individual rooms.
Rooms.
Yeah,
I don't put that there about.
I think for our purposes, when we're defining these things, that could be a bunkhouse
But it's not a permanent.
or a lodging house or whatever. That could be defined somewhere else. I think typically as we think of short-term rentals, because we have an overlap with short-term rentals being allowed in commercial areas, I think we need to be a little more stringent with our definition, because they are allowed in commercial areas. So, for example, I wouldn't consider someone building 6 cabins and then a separate building with toilets and a kitchen that all the cabins used, right? This would indicate that's a short-term rental. But in my mind, that's not a short-term rental. That's a campground, or that's a motel, or, that's something else. And so I think that's why the shared and common thing should come out. I don't have any problem with the other. Other than that, when it says access to short-term rentals, maybe from inside or out, that's already said. It's said in there twice. So one of them needs to be removed. So it says, units may or may not be accessed from the interior or, that is different. Units may or may not be accessed from the interior of a main structure. And then at the bottom, it says access to short-term rentals may be from inside or out. I find that redundant. Kind of the same thing. I actually kind of like the last one better. I know I highlighted it, but I think you take out the one in the middle, the one that's may or may not be. I think, yeah, it's because that's a negative. We should keep everything as a positive. So you can if you want to undo that highlighting on that last one. Anyway, that's my critiques of these definitions.
Highlight that last one,
Yeah.
and then you want highlighted though.
Highlight in the middle. In the middle where it says units may or may not be accessed from the interior of the main structure, because that's a negative. I don't like that wording as well as the last sentence. If it'll let me, I'll, yeah, there, yes, you got it. Any,
Just another side comment here,
Is that right there?
yes. Thank you.
with all these, lodging types. Why don't we have bed and breakfast?
We should probably define bed and breakfast. I would like to see more of bed and breakfast in town. That would be nice.
I had all of those, but I just think it's too much. So we took it out.
Okay. You have some other.
So we'll do some others, right?
Anyone else have anything on these? Ken, you've been quiet on this one.
No, you guys, I'm just letting you put your 2 cents worth in. I appreciate you, what you're trying to do and the wordage and clarity and stuff, everybody. It's an important thing. I think what you're doing.
Did my answers to your questions earlier on email? Did
Yeah,
that
thank you.
cover that?
So I think along with this, we will need to add these specific definitions, the uses in sections in our chapters. Whether that be conditional, permitted, restricted.
Yes.
But that's not tonight.
And because of that higher density for short-term rentals, residential, short-term rentals in a commercial zone. I do think there needs to be a separate section in that. That may just address the particulars of that. But knowing the regulations just to be a commercial property, you have to follow all those. There's not going to be much that we're going to have to add to it to allow or have a short-term rental with the higher density in a commercial zone. Because there's already so many restrictions just because you're commercial.
I agree, and I think we should also go into the rural residential zone and clarify in that zone that because this says that you can have multiple short-term rentals on a single property, so we need to clarify in that specific zone, you cannot have multiple short-term rentals on a single property in that zone. But see, that's the regulations that I would want to see in the definition. Where the rest of them, I think, are currently written.
Gene, I appreciate your efforts to give yourself more control over, I mean that in a positive way, more control over what developers are asking to do. And getting these definitions to a point where it gives you that kind of authority. Which that sounds like that's a struggle that you've had with the pressure on development and stuff like that. And the more you can explain that as you communicate with us as to your defining things and stuff like that, the details of why you're proposing this and why you feel it's necessary at this time with the pressure that you have. I think that's really important. Thank you and continue.
I know we talk over the phone or, through text. It's really difficult for me to write the stuff. I can explain it much better, so it's easier by either coming meet with you or have a phone call with each of you if you have questions. That's what I'm thinking. There's a lot of gaps. That's the problem. There's a lot of gaps. Currently, a guy can buy a home in a short-term rental subdivision and say, I'm gonna use this home for short-term rentals and then rent out every single room. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. If the town wants to do that, then that's the question. I mean, there's just lots of little intricacies that we'll pick up to there. We want to make changes. I really need to just talk.
One of the things that I like about this whole thing, I've been really negative about short-term rentals and throwing my position out at you as to overall how I feel, but as a businessman. And a person that my entire life I have believed in supply and demand and competition. Short-term rentals have thrown the industry upside down and shaking it out. And there's good in that. There's also challenges and things can be taken advantage of, and et cetera, et cetera. I want to be, I want the motels and the RV campgrounds to be able to compete. And for all that they put in, for all we require, they deserve good definitions so that they know the rules of the game they're playing with their competition. The short-term rentals have changed the world. And that's not always bad.
So you were thinking that you're gonna rewrite this, Cameron? That's awesome.
Yeah, that's probably enough changes that we should redo it for public hearing. unless you guys want to move forward with it as is. That is fine too, you want, if someone wants to do that. But yeah, we wouldn't be able to make the changes that I recommended in this meeting without additional public hearing.
I recommend that we send this back to the public hearing with the changes that have been made today. This public thing.
So I have a recommendation to send this back for further review at our next meeting. Is that okay? Wyatt has made that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Wyatt made the motion, Angelia seconded the motion. We'll vote, Angelia,
Yes.
Wyatt,
Yes.
Cameron. I really hate to table things. But I'm gonna say yes. Kent,
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to open the public hearing. And extend the public hearing of. No, because it's gonna be a completely different ordinance. So we'll just have to resubmit it. Never mind, scratch that. Yeah, so
I did just put it in, people, okay, put it in the next one.
yes, but if there's enough changes that we'll have to.
Yeah, I'll repost it. If everything that you table is reposted again, it's secondary.
So I have two different thoughts. So that ordinance a few months ago, 3 months ago, that was prepared by Kent and Gene Kraus. Where we're, and so we tabled that, so where we're working on it and amending it as is, do we need to bring that back and like vote on it? Where it's not gonna be the same ordinance that they prepared, does that make sense, what I'm trying to say? So their, like, their proposal was to just X the whole 60.2, right? But if we're gonna rework that, do we need to bring it back and vote on it?
Yeah, it will have to be voted on again,
But where it's just tabled, it's just kind of floating in. Whether you recommend to approve it or not.
Wasn't it tabled on until the next?
it might have been tabled till the next month.
I checked the minutes and it didn't specify.
The minutes didn't specify.
So,
I specifically voted against that because it was.
I think it was next month, and that's what it's at.
I should have had it back on there. Was it in public?
It was the reason why I wanted. to do
Crystal,
that.
can you make a note on that, and we need to put that exact ordinance up for a public hearing
It has
again,
to be our ordinance.
Yeah,
Yes.
60.2.
the deletion of it. And we also need to put that in our meeting for further action.
You want to put your.
Yes, we have to, because we tabled that and we did not come back to it, so we need to do another public hearing and then we need to take some different action on that.
And remember, FYI, because next month is moved up because of Thanksgiving, so all of your meetings are moved up.
Yeah,
So the meeting is on the second.
that means you need all changes by the end of next week.
Yeah, I need it before Chris, you don't need it to be Thursday, 2 o'clock. It won't make it.
Wednesday.
I need them before I get to work on this, I want them way before. Before last minute stuff.
So then when we attack the job.
When Tuesday.
It won't go on public hearing notice, that's.
So if you're writing an ordinance, have the Crystal by Tuesday.
So you're doing one. Dean's doing one. I get out of it this time, don't I?
So the other question I have is about referendums. That's how it was brought up in our. So as a referendum, it goes to a town or like an election style vote, right?
So the way a referendum works would be, first, the referendum would have to get 5 sponsors. And so 5 official sponsors,
So what
they submit just 5 people.
not, I guess.
Registered voters.
Okay.
They would need to get together, file a specific referendum on something. That would go to city council where they would determine if it was.
Goes to the town clerk specifically first.
Town clerk, but then the town council to see if it is, and they would accept the referendum or not. And then they have to, once that's been accepted, then they have to gather signatures, and they have to get so many signatures within 45 days.
So they just have to be in signature, they don't have, does that have to go to?
They have to get signatures and they have to be registered voters signatures.
And then those signatures are reviewed, if they meet the number of signatures required, then it will, then the town, then the city council and the mayor will decide whether they are going to voluntarily withdraw it or send it to vote. And when they send it to vote, then they decide whether they're going to vote, have a special election, or if they're going to wait until the next scheduled election.
It actually depends on
Where it lands.
Sure. if
There-
it
there's
is about
deadlines.
special that is going to make it kind of be on the ballot.
So then the town, is the town on the hook for the?
Yes.
Yes,
Process?
yes.
Is there talk of a referendum? No, it just.
It got brought up in the meeting.
As far as where you're making it a zone change it, or an ordinance that gives.
I mean, ordinance kind of be brought up. Whether it holds up or not. Yeah, that's all.
So as a, here's my thought is because I know this has been a real issue, or not an issue, but it's happened a lot of times in town. Is as a, can we create an ordinance that puts those that bring the referendum up for financial responsibility instead of the town if it fails?
No,
No.
we can't do that. That's state, governed by state code.
And why any town or city gets a referendum, they call the governor's office and the lieutenant governor's office sends them to. Virgin, no, what to do, call.
Yeah.
Great.
That was just a question.
So I had a quick question too, this stuff that I brought up about the SDR, I didn't quite get a feel from what direction you guys would like this to be seen next. You know, I would obviously be sending this out to Brown, because I thought you'd be here to discuss it, right?
I wasn't here for the discussion on this. I think you should get with Bronwyn and Kent, as they were the ones working on that.
Right, just kind of get a feel.
I like some of the, I like a lot of the ideas, like you're really simplifying what's happening, because the more you simplify it, the less opportunity there is for shenanigans.
Yeah, somebody to read something in there that's not really there.
But deciding beyond that, I mean, hadn't really gone over the phone.
Yeah. Just wanted the general feeling. I'll have to read through it. Yeah, and then after you read through it, just, remember your comments on it. Okay. And, I'll get with Brown on that and whatever input you have.
There is.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Good job. And I made the motion to adjourn, Wyatt seconded that motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's good. Are you? So. Do I just push stop on these, Crystal? James.
Definitely.
Okay.
Why you seconded that, right?
Yes.
Very good.
Go.
Thank you, Crystal.
What is that?
It's the new camera.
The new what? Camera?
Do
Oh,
you wanna come look at it before I shut it off?
No.
So when you talk, it moves in the right here.
I don't.
That's fancy.
I like.
It's not more.
Because